Welcome back to History Before Sleep, your soft landing at the end of a long day. Tonight's topic, pregnancy. But not the kind with prenatal yoga, sonograms, cute Instagram announcements. No, we're going back to 1300, a time when a missed period didn't mean a trip to the pharmacy. It meant wondering if the moon, your sins, or the village goat was responsible. We'll walk slowly through both sides of the stone wall, the cottage and the castle. Because in medieval times, pregnancy wasn't just personal, it was political, painful, and occasionally a miracle. So take a deep breath, let your jaw unclench, and settle in. Whether you've ever been pregnant or just survived modern group chats about baby names, tonight's story is for you. Before we begin, I invite you to get comfortable. Take a breath. If you'd like, tell me in the comments, what time is it, where you are, and where in the world are you listening tonight? It's comforting to know that we're sharing this quiet moment, even if separated by miles and time zones. Please take a moment to like this video and follow the channel. That way, whenever you need a quiet companion to help you sleep, you'll know exactly where to find us. If this story stays with you, leave a like or a kind word below. Tell us, do you think you could have handled pregnancy in the 1300s? Or would you have faked your own death and moved to a monastery? Thank you for spending this night with us at History Before Sleep. Let the fire fade, let the day go, and sleep if you can. Asterisk, in 1300, most women didn't fully understand what their bodies were doing, not because they were foolish, but because the knowledge had been locked away. The church held the keys. Midwives passed down secrets through murmured tradition, and the few medical texts available. They were written by men who had never once seen a womb, but felt very sure about what it might be up to. Some thought the uterus wandered around the body, sulking. Others thought it could be influenced by the stars. Everyone agreed on one thing, though the woman was probably to blame, in a small cottage just beyond the fields. A peasant woman notices she hasn't bled in a while. Not that she tracks it. There are no calendars, no apps, just the rhythm of seasons. And now something off. She's more tired than usual, craves eggs one moment, wants to throw them across the yard the next. Her lower back aches. She's dreamt of water 3 nights in a row, a known sign, apparently, that she might be expecting. Maybe it's a baby. Maybe it's the bread. She burned it last week, and no one's felt quite right since. Meanwhile, across the manor wall, a noblewoman sits perfectly still while her ladies fuss over her complexion. She's glowing, one says. She's pale, says another. She feels nauseous, wants wine. She's told no, because you see, wine might stir the womb into misbehaving. There is no confirmation yet, only suspicion. A subtle shift in how she's treated, not as a woman, but as a vessel. And if she is pregnant, then her body is no longer hers. Today, you'd pee on a stick. Back then, you'd pee in barley, literally. If the barley sprouted, congratulations. You are about to become both a miracle and martyr. The sprouting barley test was recorded in ancient Egyptian medical texts and persisted through medieval Europe. If the seeds grew, pregnancy confirmed. If they didn't, maybe you were just sick, or cursed, or unlucky. Life in 1300 was physical, not as a choice, but as a condition of survival. Every gesture had weight. Every day demanded movement. Being pregnant didn't change that. If anything, it added to it. Our peasant, whose name might have been Anne or Ellen or something long since faded from record, begins her day before the sun. She wakes on a straw-stuffed mattress shared with her husband, and, more often than not, 1 or 2 small children who wriggle in their sleep like restless little sausages. Her back already hurts, but there's no time to dwell. She stirs the embers of last night's fire. Coaxing them back to life with kindling she chopped herself, though not recently. The belly makes chopping a bit of a gamble now. Oh, she fetches water from the well, balancing the wooden pail against her hip. It sloshes. She winces. Keeps walking. There's porridge to make, goats to check. A toddler who has decided today is for tantrums. And a 6-year-old who needs convincing that socks are in fact necessary. And still, she churns the butter, sweeps the rushes, scrapes. Yesterday's stew pot. If she's lucky, there's bread to knead. If she's not, there's grain to grind by hand. A task that takes hours and leaves the arms sore, even when you're not carrying a human being inside you. She weeds the garden, hangs linen on the hedgerow, smacks her shin on the same crooked gatepost for the third time this week and mutters something unholy, then apologizes to a passing chicken. And she does all this while pregnant. There is no baby bump photo. There is no soft playlist. There are only turnips, chores, and the creeping fear that something might go wrong. Because she knows women who didn't make it. Everyone does. And still, she works. She has other children too, maybe 3, depending on the year. Children didn't always stay. Some slipped away before names were spoken aloud. Others faded with fever or fell to something as simple as a bad winter, but the ones who stayed, she loves them ferociously. Between tasks, she braids hair with calloused fingers, shares crusts of bread when there isn't enough for herself, holds small hands while stoking large fires. Discipline is firm. There's no time for softness, but affection hides in gestures. A hand to the forehead. A hummed tune while working. The way she always saves the ripest plum for the smallest child. She worries about this new baby. How it will change everything. How it might not survive. How she might not survive. And still, the sheep need watching. The floor needs sweeping. Someone's sock is missing. She is praised, not always kindly, for her strength. It's not a compliment. It's code. It means, we need you. Don't break. Modern advice might suggest she put her feet up. Avoid stress. Sleep on her side. In 1300, the advice was different. Don't eat cabbage. It causes wind. Don't tie knots. It could confuse the womb. And if you must sleep, sleep facing east. Oh, and avoid looking at anything frightening, lest the baby come out marked. Worry about superstitions. But she still listens. Because hope is hope, no matter how strange its wrapping. And when the sun sets, and the fire dies down, and the children finally sleep, she rubs her belly in the quiet and whispers a name. Only she knows. Then she sleeps. Because tomorrow, it all begins again. He wakes before the light, just as he always does, to the coarseness of wool and the familiar ache in his knees. The rooster is more punctual than inspirational. His tunic, pulled over half-asleep shoulders, smells like a marriage between damp hay and poorly smoked mutton. Still, it's the only one that's not actively on fire. His wife is pregnant. Again, he knows this the same way he knows. It will rain before the chimney starts dripping, a quiet certainty, born of watching closely. And saying very little, he is proud, is also absolutely terrified. He does not say so, of course. He sharpens the scythe, salts the pork. He offers her the larger half of the bread crust. Once, he tried to massage her lower back. She hit him with a spoon, gently, but pointedly. He doesn't understand what's happening to her body. The midwife said something about heat and dampness. And don't let her look at frogs. He nodded earnestly. He did not ask follow-up questions. His fear isn't the baby. Not really. It's her. It's the possibility of absence. Because everyone knows someone who didn't come back from childbirth. Everyone has heard a scream that ended in silence. And he has no idea what he would do. It's not because he lacks courage, but because life without her is a shape he cannot imagine. Historically, childbirth in the 1300s was an unlit corridor of risk. With no antiseptics, no transfusions, and no real understanding of the female body, women often entered labor as if stepping into a wager, a roll of the dice wrapped in prayer. And if she were to die, who would raise the child? Who would keep the hearth burning? Who would tie the toddler's shoes, or more accurately, string together bits of leather that might be mistaken for shoes? There was no village grief support group. No helpful books with cheerful titles like So You're a Widower with a Turnip Allergy, Just a Man and a Baby, and the unbearable silence of sheets that no longer moved. So he does what men like him have always done. He tries to be useful. He carries buckets, patches the roof, counts her steps when she walks too far. He notes when she breathes heavily. He notes when she stops. Sometimes he carves things. Not for sale. Not for use. Just carves. Little animals, a spoon, a knob for a door they don't have. There's no purpose to these things beyond the comfort of shaping something, making a mark and watching it hold. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes he presses his hand. To her belly, not to feel the child. Still too strange a miracle to comprehend, but to feel her. To reassure himself she's real, warm here now. It's hard to pinpoint exactly how people in the 1300s processed emotion the way we do today. Cognitive anthropology suggests the human mind hasn't changed structurally in thousands of years. Our brains, in all their complex, overthinking glory, are very old machines. But the language we use now to describe our feelings simply didn't exist then. They didn't talk about anxiety. They called it worry, or dread, or sin. They didn't have mental load. They had what must be done. And men, especially, were expected to do quietly, feel sparingly, mourn efficiently. But that doesn't mean they didn't feel. He does. Deeply. Constantly. Without ever naming it. He can't join her in the experience, can't carry it, can't share it, but he can watch. Guard, stay close. And when he lies down beside her at the end of another cold day, he doesn't need to say a word. He is still here, and so is she. And, for now, that's enough. Pregnancy cravings in the medieval world were not just dismissed as hormonal whimsy or dietary deficiencies. No, they were omens, symbols, spiritual telegrams from the mysterious realm of the unborn. Craving onions? Clearly you're having a son, craving pears. The child will be gentle or possibly fond of pears. Interpretations varied. In the manor house, a noble woman reclines on a cushioned bench, sipping rose water like it's the solution to her bloating and social anxiety. She chews a bit of ginger root, whispered to prevent nausea, and more importantly, seen as elegant. Her attendants murmur approvingly, as if her cravings are confirmations of divine favor. Meanwhile, in a cottage where the wind sneaks in, through every wall, a peasant woman sits by the hearth, nibbling mint she picked from near the well. She's not entirely sure it's safe, but it smells fresh, and her mouth tastes like iron. There are no physicians here. Just her instincts and whatever mod the midwife swears worked last time. Her cravings are not indulgences. They are negotiations. She wants salt, but salt is expensive. She dreams of apples, but they're weeks away from ripening. Sometimes the craving is so strong she dreams about food she's never even tasted. Dates, honey cakes, mulled wine with cloves. She wakes up confused and craving, and eats yesterday's barley again. Herbal remedies are her toolkit. Chamomile for calm. Rue for aching limbs. Pennyroyal. Well, that one's complicated. Used carefully, it might ease cramps. Used incautiously, it might end everything. These herbs were the pharmacy of the poor. Some worked, some didn't, and some were lethal. Noble women had more options, not necessarily better ones. Their remedies came with Latin names and suspicious origins. A paste made from crushed emeralds, good for fetal harmony, supposedly. Powdered unicorn horn protects against miscarriage. No one questioned where they were finding all these eunuchers. In both homes, the constant presence was the midwife. She arrived early, stayed late, and carried with her a satchel of dried herbs. Bone-handled tools and boundless conviction. She had no license, no degree. But she had seen birth and death so many times she could read a womb like a weathered map. Her confidence was everything, even when she was wrong, which happened frequently. Still, when she laid a hand on the mother's brow and whispered, "All will be well," something in the room settled. Belief is powerful medicine. Superstition swirled around pregnancy like smoke. A pregnant woman mustn't see a hair. The child might be born with a cleft lip. She shouldn't attend funerals. It could infect the baby with sorrow. If she spun wool, she might entangle the child's soul. If she reached too high, the cord could wrap around the neck. Rationality, see, was optional. But in a world where so little was understood and so much could go wrong, even the most outlandish beliefs offered comfort. And in that cottage or manor, under that thatched roof or vaulted ceiling, Every small ritual, every sip of rosewater, every whispered prayer was a mother's way of saying, "I'm doing my best." And sometimes that was enough. For a noblewoman in the year 1300, pregnancy was more than a personal journey. It was politics. It was duty. It was a performance. When she conceived, it wasn't only her family who took notice, it was the entire estate. The lineage was at stake, the inheritance, the alliances, and the fragile threads of power held together by the promise of a son. So she was closely watched. Her steps were measured. Her meals were pre-approved. Her every breath was a matter of estate concern. The rest was mandatory, but not out of compassion. It was protocol. She lay upon cushions stuffed with feathers instead of straw, beneath drapes meant to filter light and judgment. Her fingers swelled, but she was not allowed to complain. Her appetite waned, yet every craving became gossip. Garlic was forbidden. It stirred the blood too much. Eel was out. It was too slippery, spiritually speaking. Dancing, certainly not. A noble woman in motion could tempt fate. The physicians, who visited her draped in fur with hands soft from inexperience, recited passages from Galen and Aristotle. They measured her pulse by holding her hand and looking very solemn. They offered charts. The midwives, who stood in the shadows with their worn aprons and lined faces, offered tea. Her body became a sanctuary and a spectacle. Every hiccup was logged. Her every mood was noted. She could not speak of fear. She might infect the child. She could not dwell on sadness. She might invite it into the womb. In this gilded cage, her worth became tethered to the arc of her belly. She was no longer just a wife. She was the mother of a potential heir, a queen in waiting, or a disappointment in progress. All depending on the child's shape and cry, and if she miscarried, whispers would follow her like smoke, and she prayed. Enough? Was her soul to light? Had she angered a saint, or stepped over a cat? There were no forums, no support groups, no virtual reassurance at 3 a.m., just silence. Candles, a priest who asked her to confess more often, a lady-in-waiting who refused to meet her eye. Today, women navigate pregnancy under the gaze of algorithms and online strangers. Then it was priests and court physicians. The scrutiny is different. It's the pressure eternal. And so she lay still, quiet, composed, and wondered if, when this was over, she would be praised or pitied. Because in the world she lived in, power was not held in her hands. It was carried inside her. While his wife reclines in guarded luxury, the nobleman paces polished corridors with a face carved from wax and worry. He is a father-to-be, which in the year 1300 means very little about diapers and very much about destiny. He is not present for cravings, nor for nausea, nor for the soft ripple of movement beneath her skin. But he is ever present in the discussions. The heir, the future, the name that must endure. He speaks often of the child, but really he means a boy. That unspoken pressure hangs over every feast, every church visit, every slow walk with a brother-in-law who casually mentions the importance of male lineage. The nobleman nods, swallows his dread with a sip of overly spiced wine. Boys inherit. Girls. Well, girls complicate things. He visits the chapel more often now, his prayers thick with subtext. Let the child be strong. Let it be male. Let it cry at the right moment and not before. These are the hopes of a man who must navigate legacy as though it were law. His own father's voice echoes in his mind. It's cold, precise, never generous. There was no soft talk of emotions. Just land, titles, bloodlines. And now he too waits for a moment he cannot control, a birth he cannot witness, an outcome he cannot influence, though everyone assumes he has. Superstition is not beneath him, though he would never say so. Aloud, he wears a token tucked in his doublet, a carved ivory piece shaped like a lion gifted by a monk with a cryptic blessing. He does not touch his wife's hand during eclipses. He avoids mirrors at night. He leaves a fresh coin under her pillow each new moon, a quiet offering to whatever powers might be listening. He is told to remain calm, to lead by example. But at night, When the hallways stretch long and his steps echo too loudly, he wonders what kind of father he'll be. If he'll be one who speaks too sharply, or he'll fail too quietly, he wonders if he'll see his wife. Again, after the midwives come, he remembers how pale his cousin's bride turned, how still the room grew when her labor went wrong. No one said the word death, but it clung to every curtain. He was 15. He never forgot, so he waits and plans and practices a smile he hopes he won't need to fake, because no matter how fine his boots, how rich the tapestries, or how carefully he signs letters, there is nothing noble about not knowing if your wife will live to see the child you made together. There were no birth plans in 1300, not in the way we think of them now. No checklists, no scented oils, no laminated affirmations. There was no hospital bag packed weeks in advance, no playlist to ease contractions. There was only the moment, and the memory of how many others had come before and how many had not survived it. For the peasant woman, labor usually began while doing something else: hauling wood, turning bread, scolding a child for eating dirt. Slow cramp. A pause. A sharp breath, and suddenly the day takes a new shape. She might have sent a child running for Maud the midwife, or a neighbor might have noticed her leaning against the doorframe, eyes unfocused. Either way, the moment unfurled like a storm, unannounced, unwelcome, inevitable. There is no special room, just a corner cleared, straw layered with cloth. Boiling water on the hearth, not for sanitation, but for warmth. The knife is nearby for cutting the cord, or for more tragic uses if things go wrong. No one talks about that out loud. In the manor house, it is different in decoration only. There is a chamber prepared, linen draped over every surface, tapestries drawn to keep the air still and heavy with lavender. Candles flicker in every corner, their smoke curling toward the ceiling like cautious prayers. There are more midwives, and sometimes a physician, though his usefulness is largely symbolic. He speaks Latin. He smells of cloves. He looks grave. But if the child is turned wrong or the bleeding won't stop, there is very little he can do but look away. The noblewoman is surrounded by women, some family, some servants, some there because they are paid to be. They chant prayers, rub her feet, offer sips of broth. One might sing, one might faint. The noblewoman herself lies still, as much out of fear as of instruction. She has been told not to scream. It might scare the baby. Neither woman, peasant, or noble is given much choice in her delivery. There are no epidurals, no gentle suggestions, no pain relief but herbs and grit. The baby comes as it will, fast or slow, loud or too quiet, head first or not at all. In some places, the birthing stool is used, a wooden contraption passed down through generations, polished by sweat and panic, allows gravity to help. In other places, she is kept lying down, surrounded by hands that hold and hands that tremble. Birth in 1300 was a sacred event, and a terrifying one, because it was one of the few times society stopped to look directly at a woman and asked her to survive something no one else could do for her. And if she lived, she would be praised, but not too loudly. Baby might still be watching, or the spirits, or the neighbors. And if she didn't, the room would be scrubbed, the clothes burned. Life, as it always did in those days, would try very hard. To continue? No, there were no birth plans, only birth, and the silence that came before the first cry. The hour arrives, not with orchestration, but with groaning, with the deep animal ache that bends time and breath and certainty. Two women, worlds apart in class and comfort, now united in vulnerability. On either side of the stone wall, in a drafty cottage in a perfumed manor, labor begins. The peasant woman grits her teeth against the wooden beam, her body recalling a rhythm it has known before or tried to. She remembers the weight of it, the ache that gathers in the hips and back, like a storm cloud refusing to burst. Each contraction arrives with a grim silence, heavy and ancient. There are no watches, no intervals to measure. They sense, they wait, they hope. Her mother is close, her sister perhaps just beyond the doorway. And Maud, steady and weathered, tends with dry, practiced hands. Her voice hums low and certain, even as fear curls at the edges of her eyes. In the manor house, the noblewoman bites down on a rolled cloth. The room is dim, meant to soothe. It doesn't. She is surrounded, yet alone. There are more hands, more voices. Too many. One is reciting a prayer. Another is shouting about hot water. A physician lingers at the doorframe, unsure when he is supposed to appear useful. In both spaces, fear pulses louder than any scream. The baby is too quiet, or too early, or upside down. No one says the word breech, not unless they want to feel the air collapse. There are no sterilized tools, no antibiotics, no gloves. Hands are washed in basins and dried on aprons. Herbs are brewed, roots are chewed. Prayers are whispered to Mary, to saints, to ancestors. The line between faith and desperation is not visible here. Statistically, childbirth in the medieval period was staggeringly dangerous. 1 in 3 women did not survive childbirth or its aftermath. Infection, hemorrhage, obstructed labor, all were common and largely untreatable. A death could come slow or sudden. It was a risk that every woman knew, but rarely discussed. To name it was to summon it. In the cottage, the husband crouches on a crooked stool, a wooden bowl of water cooling slowly in his hands, more ceremonial than useful. He watches the door as if it might whisper news through its grain. He paces. The dirt floor encircles worn deep by generations, muttering quiet prayers to saints he can't name. He kneels, stands, kneels again. Duh. The wind outside taps the shutters, as if trying to come in and bear witness, while inside, time knots itself into a single, endless breath in the manor house. The nobleman stands in the chapel beneath stained glass saints who seem to stare right through him. He does not sit, he does not speak. To do so would risk unraveling the fragile composure expected of his station. Instead, he clasps his hands so tightly the knuckles pale and his eyes flicker. To the vaulted ceiling, as if answers might drip down with the candle smoke. Above him, somewhere in the upper chambers of his stone inheritance, his wife cries out or doesn't. He cannot tell. The silence is worse. Everything in the castle, from the kitchens to the stables, holds still in reverence or dread. Servants tiptoe. Footsteps echo like accusations. Even the cook forgets to salt the stew. The moment stretches beyond breaking. Pulled thin across that breathless chasm between hope and despair. And then a sound. First, a high-pitched wail, slicing through the haze like a herald of life. Then another, lower, raspier. A sob from lungs not quite ready but willing to try. To cries. To claims staked against the darkness. To small lives declaring their entry into a world that did not expect them to make it. In the cottage, the husband drops the bowl, water sloshing across the floor, forgotten. He doesn't remember kneeling, but there he is, head in his hands, weeping into his palms with the stunned reverence of a man who has dodged a blow he didn't see coming. In the chapel, the nobleman sinks slowly to the cold stone floor, not collapsing, but folding, as if the tension had finally drained from his bones. He lets the silence settle, then allows himself a single exhale, long shuddering, and almost enough to be called a prayer. Neither of them will speak of these tears. It will say the child was healthy, that the mother is strong, that everything went as it should. But deep down, they both know the truth. Something ancient passed through their homes tonight and left mercy in its place. But for those who weren't so lucky, who sat by the bed and watched it all go still, there were no support systems, no single dad's survival guides, no formula, just grief and a house full of milk with no mouth. To drink it, a peasant widower would likely remarry within months. Not out of coldness, but of necessity. Life requires partnership, someone to nurse, to cook, to carry. A nobleman might wait longer, but only if he'd secured an heir. Not, alliances would be redrawn. Love, loss, and lineage tangled together, like vines around a shuttered window. Still, when the child survives and the mother survives, it is not joy that floods the room. Not at first, it is a relief. A stunned, breathless relief. For just a while, the fear recedes. And in that quiet cradle of relief, something like gratitude flickers. Because in 1300, birth was not a given. It was a miracle. In the days following birth, when the mother was still pale from blood loss and the baby's head resembled a bruised pear, the most pressing matter wasn't rest or nourishment. No, it was baptism, eternal salvation after all. Couldn't wait for a woman to get back on her feet. For peasants, this meant fetching the village priest as soon as humanly possible, sometimes within hours. Often with the umbilical cord still warm, ceremony was swift, sacred, and slightly chaotic. A wooden bowl stood in for a font. Latin prayers were murmured over squirming infants while the mother, likely sweating through postpartum shakes in a straw-stuffed bed, was considered too spiritually messy to attend. She would be churched later, once she was deemed sufficiently cleansed of all that unholy bleeding and screaming. Godparents were chosen based on a complex system of availability, proximity, and who still owed your family a favor. The names selected were usually recycled from a narrow rotation of saints, grandparents, or recently deceased relatives. Just in case a name could convince God to keep the new baby alive longer than the last one. Meanwhile, in noble households, baptism was less about immediate salvation and more about optics. The baby was a boy, an heir. The event practically required a stage manager. It was spectacle with sacrament sprinkled in. Silk gowns were laid out for babies who couldn't yet see straight. The chapel was scrubbed. The bishop was summoned. Nobles from neighboring estates arrived, not to see the baby, but to assess its potential and perhaps find out who was next in line to marry someone. The baby.
Ow!
Often not yet old enough to lift. Its own head was held aloft by a wet nurse like a holy loaf of bread. The nobleman presented the child to the priest as if auditioning for God's approval, while the noblewoman, still sore and stitched, sat swaddled in veils like a ghost at her own party. And, oh, the gossip. If the baby cried, it meant health. If it didn't, it meant scandal. If it sneezed during the baptism, half the room interpreted it as divine favor, while the other half prepared for a haunting. After the sacred rites came the sacred feast. Minus the mother, of course. She was instructed to rest, which really meant stay out of sight while your uterus finishes shrinking. Servants poured wine, musicians played, and in corners thick with velvet and suspicion. Old noblemen speculated about the child's forehead and what it meant for the dynasty. As for the noblewoman, if the baby was male, her stock rose faster. Then a yeast roll left near the hearth. That elevation came with surveillance. Her meals were monitored with monastic precision. She was allowed brief walks accompanied, of course, through cold gardens while being congratulated on her strength, her virtue, and the shape of her infant's jaw. She was not expected to breastfeed. That duty fell to the wet nurse, who often formed a confusingly maternal bond with the child she nursed, a bond no one spoke about, but everyone noticed. The noblewoman watched from a distance, sometimes with relief, often with aching detachment. She was meant to smile, to nod, to embody the ideal of motherhood without ever smelling like milk. Because in 1300, a noble child did not belong to its mother. It belonged to the estate, the name, the contract, inked generations ago. Survival in 1300 is not a conclusion. It is a comma, a pause between trials. And childbirth, though harrowing and holy, is no exception. Because the moment the baby is out, the real fun begins. Bammed. And by fun, we of course mean unrelenting. Labor in a body that just nearly broke itself in half. The peasant woman. Now, the proud survivor of medieval obstetrics, also known as whatever Maud could remember from last time, lies back for what she hopes will be a moment of stillness. Her face is gray, her limbs tremble, and her insides feel like they were used to knead bread. But rest? No, that's a concept for the rich or the dead. Within minutes, sometimes less, the gears of daily life grind forward again. There's a child to feed, older children to wrangle, and chickens that simply do not care that their caretaker just gave birth on the floor. The floor, by the way, still needs sweeping. One child asks if it's a boy. Another wants to name it after the Family pig, she says no. Not unkindly, but with the measured fatigue of someone who can no longer form complete thoughts. She tries to smile, tries to sit. She walks before she should, bleeds longer than she ought, and hopes no one notices the dizziness, because who else will churn the butter? Meanwhile, the noblewoman is living a different sort of aftermath. One that is cleaner, quieter, and somehow lonelier. Her baby is spirited away by the wet nurse. That magical figure who appears like a maternal side character and takes over all the mammalian duties. Wet nurses, by the way, were hired based on milk production, social standing, and the assumption that their own child, the one they had just delivered, would be just fine without them. They nursed the noble child for months, sometimes years, while their own infants were often sent to relatives or, heartbreakingly, didn't survive. The noblewoman sees her child for a moment, a flash of pink skin, a nose that suspiciously resembles her husband's second cousin, and then she is whisked into her next role, patient. Her body is washed with oils and herbs she cannot pronounce. Her limbs are wrapped in linen, and her hair combed as if brushing away the memory of pain. Round her servants speak gently, but never to her directly. She is the subject of their concern, not the participant. She is told to rest, which means smile for visitors, draft thank you letters, and be seen standing upright at Mass within a week. There are arrangements to make, heirlooms to dust off, traditions to uphold. No one asks how she feels. Instead, they ask if the baby has a strong grip, if she's been eating, and whether she's offered her gratitude to God. Because heaven forbid anyone suggests she might be overwhelmed, grieving, or just slightly annoyed that her uterus now folds like a wool cloak in storage. Today we would call this postpartum depression. Back then, it was melancholy. If she cried, she was whispered about. If she stayed silent, they assumed demons. Either way, the advice was the same. Pray more, complain less, smile. Both women, the peasant and the noble, emerge altered. Their bodies are stitched by effort, their minds shifted by the near miss that is medieval birth. But there's no ritual for that. No postpartum doula. No hormone test. Just chores, expectations, and the sound of a baby that refuses to nap. Still, in the quiet that sometimes comes when the fire dims and the world forgets, for a blessed hour she reaches out and touches the small body beside her. The baby's breath, irregular but real, moves the air with fragile defiance. She counts fingers. She watches the chest rise. She lets herself feel what has been withheld. It is not joy, not yet, but it is something close. A flicker, trembling relief. Because somehow, against the odds, in a world that measured women by womb and grave, she made it. They both did. And now, as the candles burn low and the shutters hold back the night, we pull gently away from this world of straw beds and stone walls. The babies sleep, one in wool, one in linen, neither of them aware that they've just accomplished the most difficult task of all, being born in the 1300s and surviving the week. Their mothers lie awake. It's not because they can't sleep, but because sleep is a luxury few can afford. Their eyes scan the rafters. Their ears twitch at every coo, every sigh, every silence. And in those moments, something else stirs. Not quite peace, but something adjacent. A fragile hope, maybe. Or just the simple marvel that against every odd and outdated medical practice, they're both still here. The noblewoman may never change a nappy. The peasant may never stop moving long enough to cry. But both have endured something that rewrote their bodies and rewired their minds. And yet no one will carve their names in history books. No. Ballads will sing of their labor. No statue will stand in their honor. But you know now. That counts for something. So let the fire fade. Let the day go. Yourself drift. Maybe to a time with central heating and ibuprofen, but also with the echoes of these women's lives stitched into your sleep. Thank you for spending this night with us. At History Before Sleep, let the world do what it does.
You don't.
Have to not right now. Good night.